Anissa Putois is a senior communications officer with the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, in France. She joins us now live. Thanks so much for speaking to us, Anissa. I mean, more and more, these acts, correct me if I'm wrong, they're being phased out globally because no matter how, quote-unquote, well-trained these animals are, they are still wild animals. So talk us through that. Why is it never a guarantee that these animals will behave safely?
Well, this deeply disturbing event goes to show us that wild animals kept captive, and to force these animals to perform these confusing tricks that are also degrading is not only incredibly cruel, but it poses a real danger to the public, as we can see here. Unfortunately, we know that these captive animal attacks are incredibly common because regardless of them being imprisoned for months or for years on end, wild animals always retain their natural instincts. And in this case, is it really surprising that a huge wild animal being forced to push a wheelbarrow while standing on his hind legs and being yanked by a chain on his neck would become frustrated and aggressive? We know that bears are very powerful animals, and when they're denied the opportunity to fulfill even their most basic desires and needs, and they're forced into this life of constant human domination, it's really no wonder that they would suffer from depression, that they would develop these aggressive behaviors, that they would become frustrated, and that they would eventually lash out.
Right. There's also issues involved in actually training them to perform. Many animal rights activists have said it involves a form of torture. They're deprived of food. They're locked in cages. And actually, I mean, the exposure to those practices was what led to some of the closings, as we saw at SeaWorld in Florida, involving killer whales and some dolphins. I mean, is it just a matter of time, really, before all these types of shows are kind of shut down worldwide because it really is cruel for these animals?
I mean, that's the hope. We can see an overwhelming majority of the public now speaking out and opposing these cruel practices, the fact of keeping animals captive in circuses or in zoos or in marine parks. We know that animals don't want to ride bicycles. We know they don't want to stand on their heads, balance on bowls, jump through rings of fire, push wheelbarrows around. They perform these tricks because they have no other choice. Trainers use violence often and fear to make these animals perform in the way that they want them to. They're hit, whipped, they're shocked with electric prods. They're sometimes dragged around, and we know that this barbaric regime of physical and psychological punishment starts when these animals are mere babies. They're taken away from everything that they know, they're separated from their families, their spirits are broken in this preparation for what will become a lifetime of abuse.
You know, Anissa, it's also not just what happens in, you know, a circus or in animal parks. This event happened to be in Russia, and we also see this kind of abuse of some animals on the streets of that same country. I have to say Russia is not the only one, obviously, and tourists tend to revel in it. I mean, it's disturbing to see that the taming of some of these animals for street performers will involve, for example, in monkeys removing their teeth entirely so that they can't bite. I mean, when might we get to the point where that is also taken seriously and outlawed?
Well, we do know, as you say, that the pet trade and the tourist trade with wild animals is a very big business and a very cruel business. These animals are either taken from the wild or they are bred into captivity, and many don't survive their conditions in the hands of these unprepared and incompetent caretakers. Many animals die or suffer from negligence or become aggressive as we've seen. And as we've seen, it's incredibly dangerous for humans as well. These attacks are perpetrated against staff, but also against members of the general public, audience members in circuses or in the tourist trades, just regular tourists and passerbys.
Right. Okay, Anissa, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it.